Jesus tells us in Matthew 5:14, "You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden." This is a series helping others see Christ by seeing the light in others.
Well, Mark's got quite a varied background, and of course, one of the things that we really want to do for everybody here, and Mark and I've talked about this too, that we want to know, we want people to see Christ like He really is. We want to kind of take religion away from it and put it to the side for a second and just talk about Christ. Mm-hmm. Because people use religion a lot of times as an escape.
Yeah.
And a reason not to have that relationship. It's kind of like the two R's. You got religion or relationship, and what you need is both, actually. But the most important is to have a relationship. So how do you go about with your daily relationship with God?
Well, let's see. One of the things, and again, talking about relationships. So many I have seen, crossing my path in my life, would be they look at a disciple as someone other than themselves. They would never be a disciple. Mm-hmm. And yet, God calls us. He left us on this earth to be disciples and to be able to share the good news. So my mindset, for me, it was, I had to be shown that through examples. It's so funny. Examples of prayers that I would lift up to God for God to intervene on something without me getting involved in it. I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. I had a season, or had this instance in my life when I met a young man named Jamie. And I was working on a big project in New Mexico. And where I was working I was working north of the Albuquerque area. So it was a big town called Bernalillo, and I was north of Bernalillo up in a place called Cuba, New Mexico. And that was 60 miles from Bernalillo. So I had to do some work. I had to go to meet with some meetings, some different things in Bernalillo. And I saw this young man walking on the side of the road. It was real windy that day. It was in the desert. And it was real windy. And this guy was walking. He was in a bright blue T-shirt. And he had a step. His pace was really fast. Like he was determined to get somewhere. He had literally nothing in his hands. And I was like, wow. I mean, I'm in Bernalillo, 60 miles from where I'm staying, and I see this young man walking down the road, and I was like, Lord, he's got quite a step, And then I just went to my meeting. I did my meeting thing, and I was in Bernalillo just for a little while. I might have picked up dinner or something for myself because there's not a lot to eat up there where I'm at. Got on the road to drive back to where I was staying. 30 miles from when I left, halfway, 30 miles within 30 minutes of me getting back on the road, I see this young man with that same pace walking on the highway. And as I drove past him, I said, Lord, if you could send somebody to help him get to where he's got to go.
I can feel this coming.
I was like, Lord, maybe it's a police officer, maybe it's a friend. Mm-hmm. But he's a long way. He could not have walked that far that fast. Lord, come on, 30 miles in 30 minutes. And I drove, and I prayed. And 5 miles into that driving away from him, the Holy Spirit turned me around, and I went back, and I pulled up to him. And I was thinking, because see, I had been warned by the people I was working with up in New Mexico that you had to be careful because of the Indians up in that area. Mm-hmm. They're living on the reservation. There's a lot of drugs. There's a lot of different things that goes on up there, but you have to be careful. They'll be on the side of the road, hitchhiking. They just said, just be careful. This young man was not hitchhiking. He was walking, and he was full pace, full speed. I turned around, and I was talking to myself the whole way down there, and I was like, well, I got a pickup truck, and I'll just ask him if he could sit in the back. I would feel safer to do that. Mm-hmm. pulled over right to him. He came up to the window, and I only cracked the window like so far. And he said, "Sir, thank you for stopping." And I said, "Well, how far are you going?" And he told me Farmington, which was another 30 miles or 40 miles past where I was staying. And I was like, "You're not going to get there by dark." I said, "Why don't you go ahead and hop in the back?" And he said, "Thank you." No hesitation, just jumped in the back, got in there, and got comfortable. I didn't even pull away before I said, the Spirit was just tearing me up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're not hauling luggage, Mark. You're not carrying a package
Let him
somewhere.
in the seat. Yeah.
I said, "Why don't you come sit up here in the front with me?" And I introduced myself, and his name is Jamie, and I got to hear his story and what was going on in his life. And I was like, you got a long way to go. And it gave me an opportunity to share with him a little bit. And I asked him one of the questions that, we got to the point of the Bible, and I said, a lot of times when you go to a hotel, I said, "Jamie, when you go to a hotel, you've seen that they've got a Bible, and a lot of times in the," and he said, yeah. And I said, "It's a Gideon Bible." And they put that in there for people because a lot of people, they're by themselves. They're troubled. They're going through some problems.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives that opportunity for them to open the pages. It's like a lot of times you just say, "Lord, speak to me," and you just flip the book open, try to speak to me in that. And it might be in a translation that you totally don't understand. And sometimes, a lot of times, you're grasping.
Mm-hmm.
And Jamie was going through a real difficult time. He was now homeless because he had just got thrown out of where he was staying. He was trying to get to his family that's on Farmington, but he had no phone with him to contact them, so they didn't know that he was coming. And if he got there, he didn't know whether they would accept him. He just didn't know. There was all these uncertainties.
Mm-hmm.
So when we got back to Cuba, I said, "Listen, I'm going to put you up for tonight so you can get some rest before you make this trek, this long walk back to Farmington. I know you can do it because I saw your pace. I know that you're determined to get there." And he was just very grateful to be able to do that. And I pulled up at a hotel. I went ahead and paid for it, took care of him to be able to get in. And I said, "And I'm going to come back in the morning and I'm going to pick you up for breakfast. But for tonight," I pulled out $20 and I said, "Why don't you, there's restaurants right up in here. They're not far if you'd like to go pick up something to eat." I went home, prayed again. Prayed with him before I left, but I went home and I prayed again. For God to be able to just surround him and, to be with him so he could feel the evidence of him being close.
Mm-hmm.
The next morning I got up and I went to the hotel and come out, and he walked out of that door after he saw me coming in, and he had a big smile on his face, and he had some bags like from McDonald's, because he had been to McDonald's that night. And I said, "Well, listen, it's great to see you. How'd you sleep?" He said, "Mark," he said, I read that Bible. I was reading those passages you were telling me about. I read those, Mark. I'm really thankful, that you let me stay here tonight, And I said, you're welcome. I said, "Well, let's go get some breakfast." He said, No. He said, "No, I don't need it." All these dollar menu stuff. I went ahead and I spent that $20 and I bought enough food for me to last for a while on my trip up to the mountain.
That's good.
He's preparing.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay. So we got to talk for a little bit, and I said, so what, what's keeping you from accepting Christ in your life today? And he said, "Nothing." And I said, "Do you want to receive him today?" And I asked him to pray with me. And he prayed with me. And he accepted Christ that day.
That's
while
beautiful.
we were on the road. And I got him to the edge of town, is where we talked about that I would drop him off. I wasn't going to drive him all the way to Farmington. This is what I felt the Spirit was telling me. And I just said, I'm going to go ahead. I had other responsibilities I needed to take care of. But I had a New Testament Bible, a small one. And I gave that to him, and I said, "Listen, as you're walking and you're praying," I said, "His word says that if you acknowledge him, he will keep your feet from being snared. He will keep you from tripping up. And you raise that Bible up if there's something, if it's coming up a storm and you're saying, Lord, if you could send somebody to help pick me up to be able to get to Farmington, I'm telling you, your prayers are going to be answered." And I know in my heart that day, that young man accepted Christ. And I know God's got hold of him. I don't know what choices he's going to make from that point forward. That's not up to me. But he accepted Christ that day, and in doing so, that ensured where he will spend eternity.
Absolutely.
So,
We want to challenge you today to search the way you are portraying Christ in your life. Do others see Christ in you? We all need to witness by example and let others see Christ in us.